Welcome to Construction Week Viewpoint. My name is Oscar Russo and today we're talking about public-private partnerships and smart city schemes. Joining me to tackle these subjects is Mott MacDonald's Managing Director for the Middle East, Chris Seymour. Chris, it's really great to have you here in the studio. Thank you so much for joining me.
Great to be here, Oscar. Thank you very much for inviting me in.
No problem. So I know, we wanted to tackle, PPPs and smart city schemes, but I thought first, just for those who may not have heard of Mott MacDonald's work in the region, can you just bring us up to speed on what you're doing in the region and the kind of projects that you work on?
Sure. Mott MacDonald is, in terms of our scale, we're about 1,300 people in the region, and we cover most of the locations across the Middle East. And we also cover most of the sectors. So our business is split across sectors. That includes transportation, water, built environment, and energy. And energy covers oil and gas and power together. And we also have an advisory business. Okay. So that's really describes what we do and where we do it. And the combination of that is really important to cover both location and sector. Gives our business a certain amount of resilience and sustainability in the economic sense, and so that's, as I say, that's an important thing for us.
Okay, and what type of projects are you currently working on at the moment?
I suppose it's across all of those sectors. So it's a very broad, a very broad piece around the types of projects that we're doing. I would say that oil and gas has come back quite strongly in 2018, slightly stronger than we were expecting, actually. And that's both in, we're finding that both in Oman and also in Abu Dhabi, and we're also finding that moving up in Kuwait now as well. Transportation is also quite strong, although transportation as a market is really fundamentally a number of large schemes. Mm-hmm. And it really depends on where that large scheme is taking place. So we're lucky enough to win the 4th Ring Road in Kuwait just recently, okay. And so that's one of the big transportation schemes that we're working on there. And it's a matter of tracking those transport programs closely, because, as I say, there's not so many of them, and they're usually quite large when they happen. And I think that trend of improving national infrastructure across the region is something that we're seeing. So it's a matter of, whilst we have presence in the territories, you can't just treat the Middle East as those territories separately. You really have to see it in a much more holistic approach, I suppose, really considering it as a region, to make sure that you can move your resource to the area and location that it's needed. Water engineering is another classic case. Our water sector is very strong. Those large projects happen again in a territorial aspect. You've got to move your resource to actually meet that demand. But I would say probably in terms of strength, oil and gas is probably, in terms of growth, is probably the better performer of 2018. Seeing some challenges around the built environment, I think, certainly in the UAE, and I'd really focus on Dubai and that. Not so much new stuff coming up now, although I think actually we were always expecting that. You could see the pipeline is quite transparent, that pipeline, so we knew where it was. Absolutely.
And talking about Dubai and the UAE as well, Chris, you chaired Construction Week's panel on smart city schemes a couple of weeks ago, and you spoke about the smart fog permeating the industry. Can you just talk about what Mott MacDonald is doing within smart city schemes?
Yeah, sure. And I think this is a theme that has probably done a disservice to smart cities, because smart cities are not only are they a real initiative, it is, in my view, the correct descriptor for the outcomes you're looking from a smart city, which is really combining efficiency, sustainability, and that so-called happiness. And I think that's important. What's happened today, of course, is that things from whether it's wearable technology to actually how you dress is called smart. And so I think that tends to have detuned the impact a bit of the smart city. But as I say, smart cities are real, and Dubai is taking this seriously.
Of course.
Now, for as far as I'm concerned, as far as Mott MacDonald is concerned, one of the fundamentals of the smart city is really around the mobility piece.
Okay.
Unless you can create connectivity, not only in a physical sense, but also in the sense of the experience, then I would argue you have not got a smart city. This is really, really quite fundamental. And so our future mobility team at Mott MacDonald is not surprisingly very busy at the moment, looking at actually how you can create that. So it's really the seamless physical journey, but also that seamless experience, whether it's just using the same method of payment, or whether it's continuity of where you work, how you travel. And this is really the important thing for us. So really for us, a smart city can't be smart unless you've got smart infrastructure, and that future mobility is really that look ahead to see where it's going. Most of the clients say to us, since master planning is such a long-term objective, how can you tell us that what you're master planning now is going to be fit for the future in 10, 15 years' time? And that's a really realistic challenge. Yeah. And unless you start looking at this from the other way around, in other words, considering what is going to be the future of, for example, mobility, you will never master plan effectively. And so that's the way we look at it, is really looking into the future, what is possible and predicting what is likely to happen, and then reconsidering the master plan around that piece.
I mean, because it's such a challenge, isn't it? Because the evolutionary nature of technology, like you said, means master planning now could be outdated in 10, 15, 20 years' time. Yeah. So staying ahead of those trends is really important. What are the trends that you see kind of dominating, say, for example, the transport sector in 10, 15 years' time?
I think there's a lot of talk around autonomous vehicles, and we're doing a lot of work in that in that space. And I think we're going to see a change from, first of all, the step isn't going to be straight into the autonomous vehicle. First of all, we are going to have vehicles that are self-parking. In fact, many new cars that you will buy have probably got the technology in them now to self-park. Now, this is immediately going to have an impact on the things that we do every day. So when you travel to the mall, rather than having to park your car, it will park itself. Now, this fundamentally changes the way you're going to lay a mall, create the layout of a mall, because what you're going to need to do is have a large set-down area and probably a smaller parking area, because cars can actually park much more autonomously. They can park much more accurately and use less space. There's a lot less room for error. So what we're finding this is doing is potentially releasing space for more retail. So out of the same footprint, you could probably get more retail space. And of course, this is really important if you're a developer. Yeah,
of course. Really, really fascinating. Are there any other kind of major trends that you see kind of like dominating cities moving forwards regarding smart city concepts?
I think I think a lot of this comes back to there's a lot of talk about smart buildings. The technology around the building services is actually already here. The barrier is not technology. However, in order to, that will forever just exist in the individual buildings. If we are to, the theory of the smart city is actually that there's a much more integrated approach to it. And we are forever going to be talking about separate assets unless the government takes, has a larger presence in the creation of the city. So from that, I mean, becoming more of a stakeholder.
Right.
So I think one of the things that we talked about at the recent conferences was more regulation. I think what the panel participants were talking about was, it wasn't so much about regulation, it was more around participation. And I think that's the word we're looking for, is greater government participation, so you can actually truly get that integration. One of those aspects could be the creation of a citywide model. There's a number of cities in Europe that have actually achieved this. So if it's an open source model of a city, then not only would that save a lot of time, because we would stop all the individual consultancies, we would stop resurveying exactly the same stretch of the city, but it would also mean that you've got commonality of the starting point. And this is really important. So I think it's going back to really looking at your base data and encouraging, and really the private sector being open to more participation by the government. And honestly, we would welcome that.
And that's great. And Chris, that leads me really well onto the next topic, which is about PPPs. You know, before we came on air, you and I were discussing, we said PPP models seem to be almost in vogue at the moment. We've seen them launch across Saudi Arabia, Oman, Kuwait, the UAE as well. Yeah, what's McDonald's role in PPP models, and what are your thoughts on those models moving forwards?
I think the to start with, I think the it is. We sometimes talk about PPP being new to the Middle East. It is not new to the Middle East. I think the first PPP deal was, in fact, in Oman in the 1980s, and it was around water and power. And that deal has been very well exercised in this region, probably to a greater extent than anywhere else in the world. So if the rest of the world wants an example of how to put away a power and water PPP, they need to come here, because this is where it's been done. But this is the type of PPP which is much more revenue generated. It is not around the more, I suppose, intricate delivery of social infrastructure, including schools and hospitals. So education and healthcare is where a number of these programs, particularly in Saudi, are focused. And that is new to the region. Now, the rest of the world has had a lot of experience around this, and usually what happens is that nations jump to the PPP model due to a cash constraint. And this is the lack of cash is probably the worst reason to take on a PPP. And what you've got to look for is the value for money improvement, and also the increase in capacity that it creates at a government level by actually passing some of the resource and capacity requirement over to the private sector. Not only are you getting value for money, you're also getting increase in capacity. What I'm seeing in the Middle East is that this is the Middle East has definitely understood that these are the advantages to get. Sovereign debt is in the Middle East is still some of the lowest in the world. So whilst the oil price has created some challenges in the past, it's increasing a little bit now, which is good news. But it has created some over the last 2 or 3 years. It has created some challenges. The ability for the Middle East nations to leverage their sovereign wealth has always been there, and so in order that direct investment. There has always been that ability to directly invest, but what we're seeing now is the understanding that actually by bringing in the private sector, you're going to get expertise and you're going to get value for money, and so those are both absolutely realistic objectives for the PPP. From Mott MacDonald's perspective, it's always nice to be in a leading position, but Mott MacDonald deals with a higher value of PPP deals across the globe than any other consultancy, and so it is absolutely one of our leading areas, and we're very happy to be participating in some of them here too.
So I imagine, do you expect to be boosted by the fact that PPP models are in vogue, and there seems to be an increase in PPP models in the region?
We are expecting that, and I think that the thing is that we shouldn't over-expect. I was heavily involved in the UK PFI waves, and the one thing you did learn from that was that they take a long time to actually get on the ground, and any client should forecast 2 years to get a project onto the ground in a PPP context. If it's needed sooner than that, I would always advise exploring other methods of procurement. So if it's speed you're after, the PPP is unlikely to be one of your top scoring procurement routes. However, if there is a longer term objective around value for money, then absolutely it should be considered.
Fantastic. And now I know there are commercial sensitivities and NDAs involved with a lot of projects that Mott MacDonald and of course many other contractors and consultants in the region work with, but can you provide any examples of the projects that you're involved in that follow a PPP model?
I think I can probably do it generically. There's certainly a lot of Saudi Arabia is focusing on a number of sectors. Healthcare is one of them. Water is another one. We're quite familiar with the airports, which was actually put to the market quite rapidly. Actually, we saw that come out quite quickly. So we can see what the focus is a lot around. It's around system infrastructure, including water. and it is including and now exploring healthcare as well.
Okay.
And those are definitely Saudi Arabia is the biggest PPP market. I would say Oman is the oldest PPP market for the region. And I think we also should respect Kuwait's position, because Kuwait has got quite a healthy liquidity position at a government level. Yet they have been pursuing PPP from quite a few years ago, learning the lessons and working out the model that's needed. So I think that's those three locations are really the ones that we focus on as far as that's concerned.
Okay, fantastic. Clearly, lots of exciting stuff then in that
Indeed.
space moving forwards. Chris, could you just talk to me about the kind of the main operational challenges that Mott MacDonald faces in the region at the moment?
Yeah, I think the main one is probably around two things, and it's all based around people. The first is what I call agility of resource, and we touched on it a little earlier. This is maintaining an agile and mobile workforce that is able to work on projects across the region. Now, this does not mean that you actually have to move people physically to the location. Sometimes you do.
Yep.
But what we need to focus on and are focusing on is creating the right technological environment to allow them to participate on projects across the region, whether that's in a design sense or literally in a consulting sense.
Okay.
So that is one of the challenges, and I would say the other challenge is very much around talent. We know that multicultural and cross-gender teams are high performing. That is a fact. To find that talent, as I say, across the cultures and between the two genders is sometimes hard work.
Okay.
And so we would welcome an increase in women in engineering,
Okay.
and also from different nationalities as well. When you have that mix, you usually have a high performing team. So that's for us, that's good news for everybody. It also shows the right opportunity mix across those two segments. So that's really the one of the key things. I think many people would also argue that getting paid on time.
Yep, of course.
And also tighter margins are the key operational. Key operational difficulties. Well, maybe I've been in this business too long, but those have always been the operational difficulties for my entire career. And I've been in the region 9 years.
Yeah.
Even when I was in the UK, that was still a problem then.
Yeah.
I came out to the region, and sure enough, when I'm looking at working capital days, which is the way that consultancies and pretty much every business looks at their books, were they higher here? Well, they were a little higher, but not absolutely off the chart. I think it's about this is more around how we work with clients and how they actually perceive our service, and around that. But I will come on to that.
Yeah.
There is an opportunity that I don't think we've explored enough yet, and I see in the future this becoming more important. The way we're using technology, one of the guaranteed advantages of it, if you ask a client, what do you think you're getting out of technology? The one thing they should get is speed.
Right.
Now, they will also get better quality, but that would be to say we weren't doing good quality before, and we were. So that's not really fair. Yes, we will get more, we'll get better at clash detection and that type of thing, but fundamentally, they will get speed. If you get speed, you also get a longer thinking time.
Okay.
And that you can use that thinking time to make sure that when you actually commit to that project, it is exactly what you want. So if you can move, for example, the design of let's say a functional civil engineering asset from days to minutes, as we know we can do this, and we have done it on projects, then just imagine the amount of time you've opened up to have those conversations with the clients to make sure that really what you're designing is exactly what they want, not not approximately what they want, but exactly what they want. I think if you said that to clients, they'd say, thank goodness me, that's exactly what we're after. So you're using that speed not just to get the project done quicker, but to make sure it's right at the end.
Well, exactly. And just touching on that as well, design changes as well is such a key issue. I speak to a lot of contractors and a lot of colleagues and friends in the industry, and God, they say the number of changes on a project afterwards is just incredibly frustrating. So if you had that space to really not rush into that project, it could be potentially transformative.
Exactly, and quite often now I'm not saying it's all the entire picture, but quite often the intense discussions around payment are often from changes during the contract. Now, whether that's from a contracting perspective or from a consulting perspective, that's quite often where those discussions lie. If we can increase the pace of design, as we know we can, and offer that as an opportunity to the client, then I believe that we'll cut down those major changes. There will always be small changes, but we can cut down the major changes, and that will lead to better clarity of payment for the solution, and hence the payments will be eased. So I think that is for me, that's an opportunity that's coming down the track.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed, and lots to look forward to. Just talk to me about your expectations for the year ahead for your company. Are you planning maybe to hire new staff, to explore other avenues, or create new jobs, or open up new markets? What are your plans and expectations?
We're still in a position of recruitment at the moment.
Okay.
I'm pleased to say. I think that the year is going to be the rest of 2018. I think for most consultants is pretty much taken care of by the time you get to September. So looking around at 2019, we're looking at a gradual increase in the scale of our business, but fundamentally an improvement in the quality of that business, I would say. Now, this is likely to mean that we need to employ slightly different individuals. I suppose Mott MacDonald is well known. We're famous for being an engineering company,
of course.
But what Mott MacDonald will also be famous for is being an engineering company, a program management company, an advisory company.
Okay.
And that is what we're transitioning to. And we're already undertaking that type of those type of services for clients, and we're only seeing that side of the business growing. That links in with the technology piece that I talked about, because this is very much an upfront service, almost describing the possible to a client at the front end, right at the front end of a project, so that it's actually conceived properly. And that's really where we see our main areas of advice. So that's for me, 2019 is going to be. It's not going to be one of dramatic increase for anybody, I would say. There's certain high points across the region and across the sectors, but it's still a pretty optimistic place, I think. And one of the reasons that I think we're all here is because the pace is quite rapid. Things change fast. And at the moment, on balance, that seems to be reasonably optimistic. Yeah.
Well, what a good point to end it on, reasonably optimistic. Chris, thank you so much.
No problem at all. Thank you.
No problem. Well, you've been listening to Construction Week Viewpoint. We publish new episodes at midday every Monday. Please join us next week for another conversation about the built and natural world. Once again, thank you to Chris Seymour from Mott MacDonald. But until then, thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.